now when I look at everything, I feel like, there's nothing we could do to change our past, right? So, we walk down these dark paths, and some make it out, some don't. I have people that went away and are still incarcerated after 30 plus years, right? Some of them spent decades in solitary confinement, whatever. So here's something that I see, like, because I made it through, I want to make sure that I use that lesson, in a very special way.
Yo, welcome to another episode of In a Minute with Evan Lovett, coming to you live from the I Am Studios in the heart of LA. And this episode is all about heart, because my guest today is not just a true LA American dream story, but a redemption story, a story of inspiration, a story of art continuing to grow and take over the world and provide such a foundation for the people of Los Angeles and beyond. I'm talking about David Cavazos, better known as Big Sleeps, worldwide iconic artist, street artist, tattoo artist, muralist. And he's got one hell of a story that we are going to dive into. So David, Big Sleeps, Mr. Sleeps, thank you for being here.
Thank
really
you, brother.
Appreciate you, man.
It's a pleasure, my honor, man, to be here, bro.
Yes, thank you.
Honor to be here.
All right. So there's so much to get into. All right. First and foremost, I like the fact that you're born and raised in Pico-Union, one of LA's most historic neighborhoods. Now you live in Lakewood, which is another one of LA's most historic neighborhoods. And they both have such a deep history and deep story. And they have both determined different periods in your life and different eras of your development. But let's first talk. How do you describe what you do and what you've accomplished? Because you were groundbreaking with your lettering style, it's known as, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you were younger, it was just graffiti or tagging, and the world didn't look at it like art.
Yeah.
And you've evolved and changed a little bit, but the style is the style. And now your work is in museums. People fly you around the world to do tattoos or do murals and showcase your art. And it's really been celebrated as you've grown and developed. So first, give us a background on all that and how you describe what you do and what you've accomplished.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on. Thank you for the kind words, man.
Absolutely.
Humbling for sure. The people that know about Pico-Union or the history of Pico-Union, and the letter forms that once adorned all the walls, right? Whether they were, vandalism or looked at in a derogatory way, right?
Yeah.
I guess I drew my influence from coming up in a neighborhood like Pico-Union, right? Which had the gang culture and the explosion of the graffiti culture in the early 80s with the New York graffiti coming in and, the gang graffiti that predates all of that, right? And I think we all, when we're coming up and have that inclination that we want to be an artist, we draw from my environment, from our surroundings, right? Early on as a little kid, man, I could remember walking to school and looking at all the lettering on the walls and like really being fascinated by it. And looking at my brother's peachy folders. I don't know who remembers the peachy folders, bro.
Of course. We got some peachy stickers right out here, too.
Yeah, so it set with me, right? I had that artistic heart already as a young kid.
Right.
Tracing Iron Maiden album covers that my brother had and all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
But the letter forms really stuck out. I remember getting in trouble, for picking up spray paint from the auto body parts right there on Venice and Bonnie Bray and running back to the alley and trying to mimic some of the letters. I must have been in early elementary school. And
how old?
Mom's trying to, like yelling at me and telling me, don't do that. Like, what are you doing? Immediately, it's a red flag for my parent or for my mother. I'm a, single parent raised, but I had no idea, what was so wrong with it besides, well, I'm writing in the neighbor's garage, right? But everything was written on. So you didn't really know, like, hey, this is something that you shouldn't do because, my mother saw it as only the cholos, which are, gang members right on the walls. So I didn't understand that. So it just comes to show you that I was attracted to the lettering and the discipline and the ornate letter forms way before I understood anything about, what they resembled or what they identified, in the neighborhood.
It was the artistry of it.
The artistry
that appealed
of it.
to you. The color,
Yeah.
At that point, was it the action, the excitement, or was that not relevant yet at that point?
A little bit of everything.
Right.
Like I said, this is a very, very young age, but I remember always trying to write like that and try to doodle stuff. And early on, when the graffiti explosion came, giving it, a shot as well, trying to do some of the bubble style letters and all these other types of letter forms. And, for those that know about the Radiotron, we used to go over there and look at all the beautiful graffiti and get inspired by that, right? And run home and, put these colorful pieces together in our little books and stuff like that. This is a very young age, man. Must have been 84, 85, and I must have been 10 or 11.
Right. And that's the age. I mean, my son's a little bit of an artist. But it just kind of came out of, he had little inclinations when he was younger, but now just sit and draw, for hours at a time. And it's like pretty dope to kind of see that expression, but not everybody's like that, right? Like for me, I'm a talker, obviously, so
that's an art in itself, right? Talking is an art in itself. Huh?
Hey, thank you. I might have to cut that clip right there. Talking. No, but okay. So you were young. Let me ask you, what kind of student were you? What kind of kid were you at this point? Obviously, you're infatuated with the letters and all this kind of stuff and drawing and the art. But what were you like as a person at a young age?
Probably a normal kid, man. There was a Pico-Union, just to say, like, it was an amazing place to grow up.
Yeah.
Kids would roam the streets, and we were playing, on the streets and tag football and running around everywhere. And this is the era when kids still ran around everywhere, right?
Sure.
It's an amazing memory in my mind to think about it. The kids had baseball, team on the street there, and they had their little bases painted on the sting. And it was a really good memory. But then you have the other side of Pico-Union, which was already infested with gang violence and all these things. And I think when you grow up in an environment like that, that's just something that you're used to seeing. You didn't move in there. I was born and raised on 17th in between Hoover and Bonnie Bray my whole life. My mother was there since the late 60s.
Okay. Wow.
So nothing seemed out of place. A neighbor getting shot or somebody getting shot on the corner was normal. There was no like, oh, wow, like there wasn't something that happened every blue moon. It always happened.
Life, yeah.
So we grew up like that. We could be playing kick the can on the street and somebody would get shot on the corner, right? And it was just a very interesting childhood, right? We loved breakdancing. We would go breakdance and take our cardboard, to Hoover and Venice or around Toberman Park area, which is an iconic park in Los Angeles. I gave it my shot. I was into heavy metal. My older brother, Sergio, which was my mentor, man. And,
how much age? What's your age difference?
There's quite of an age difference. He graduated in 84, so I was 11 when he graduated high school.
Okay, that's not crazy.
He left to Chico State, but he was a drummer. He's still a drummer now. He's been drumming. He's got me into the rock, man. I had long hair, bro. I had wearing Iron Maiden shirts and Black Sabbath shirts with the hands coming out of the cross, and going to elementary school like that. So kind of following his lead. Very interesting. People still that know me from back then they're like, remember when you had long, crazy hair? And this is a good story. Nobody knew that, man, but so there was multiple, I'm trying to adapt to all the, we're skating and doing everything that kids do, man. You want to be a part of everything growing up in a neighborhood like that.
Okay, so tell me this, though. I know that along the way, you have said you had a self-described turbulent adolescence. So talk about that. What changed? Because I know in a lot of neighborhoods in LA, there's a lot of influences, and at a certain point, your peers become a bigger factor on you than your family.
Yep.
So talk about that. What ended up happening? Because I know you had some tribulations that you dealt with.
I mean, I was always a good student as far as school goes. I remember, doing great in school. Loving school, never struggled with my studies or anything, but the distractions, I'm not going to lie, I get distracted easy. I honestly could say, now that I've had a lot of time to reflect on my life and stuff and really try to pinpoint some of the things that have guided me, down dark paths. I probably think when my brother left to college, I lost that.
The role model, if you will. Yeah.
Because not long after he left in 84,
Okay.
85, we were still kind of breakdancing or whatever. But 86, I remember getting arrested for tagging, in junior high school and getting brought home in a police car on Halloween or something, and I think that was the first time ever, and my mom was so disappointed that they brought me home and it was heartbreaking for her,
Yeah.
And I wasn't in a gang or anything. It was just tagging up. We lived on 17th Street, and I don't remember what I was riding, but I think 17th Street or something, boys. And we had like a little club there. We would play football and all this stuff. Nothing, no gang stuff. Okay. But that was my first arrest, actually getting put in handcuffs,
13 years old?
I don't remember what. I must have been about 13.
Okay.
But, some of the friends that remember, they're like, man, you were getting arrested early. What happened after that was a mystery to me, man. I think there was this era when a lot of the breakdancing crews and a lot of the kids that were in the football teams, right, in Pico-Union and a lot of surrounding areas, everybody had a football team, everybody had a bike club, and
right.
They all became, engulfed in some type of conflict, right? It went from very fast-paced. We were battling the kids, on Turbulent Street breakdancing or wherever, that was the thing, right?
Yeah.
How it turned into fights and then, violence, is still a mystery to me. It just kind of this 86 era, 87 era. Yeah. And I think you could actually go back and look at the history of L.A. on murder rates rising and all this stuff. All those clubs and crews and everything literally got labeled as gangs and got kind of turned into everything went from fights to full-fledged gang wars, man. You know what I mean? I don't know if you're familiar with the history of this stuff, but I got sucked into that, man. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things nobody was looking to join any gang or anything. It's just kind of like you live on this street,
right?
And kind of the kids that used to be on the next street that, we used to breakdance against or, play football against, they're no longer considered friends because now there's whether there was a fight over something or some miscommunication, it just kind of morphed into this crazy dark era, man. You know what I mean? And I started getting incarcerated and getting in trouble and things kind of spiraled out of control. You know what I mean? My mom lost control of me, man. And, for those that know my story of how fast, my life went down that road. And then I was able to navigate back and turn it around decades later. They're still blown away by how I was able to do that. You know what I mean? I feel like God had his hand on my shoulder the whole time.
Man,
guiding me, bro.
Faith is so important too.
It is. My mother prayed for me every day. Always. She always waited up for me. I remember the days when I stopped coming home as a teenager, right? I stopped coming home at 11. Curfew was no longer curfew, and my mom would go look for me. People are going to listen to this and remember my mom was probably one of the only moms that would go look for me at Toberman Park or in the alleys right there behind Burlington and Bonnie Bray when it was very dangerous.
In the dark.
She never gave up. Never.
That's my brother. Mother's love right there.
Yeah. By 1988, I had already been arrested multiple times. I don't recall if she asked my brother to come back, but, my brother had been gone a few years. And
were you staying in touch when you were going down this path, right? And I know it's not like it is now, no cell phones and all this kind of stuff, but were you staying in touch with your brother at all when he was at Chico State?
I think he would call a lot. Yeah. My brother's always been, even till now, the most disciplined minded, just with the best advice on health, on everything, man. He still, eats good and everything. And he was giving me health tips back then, man. You know what I mean? And I never, he's cut that shit. You're going to be diabetic, bro. And I was like, what is he talking about? He's just trying to hog all the cereal or something, right? Yeah, it's funny, man.
Right.
But, we were kind of keeping in touch. But at that point, something happened where it's just you get sucked into this, friends and the environment and, it's a real crazy, thing to think. How does it become that, you start getting kind of praised for getting in trouble, right? In these neighborhoods,
yeah,
the mindset is very strange where, people kind of glorify or you get clout
street cred,
when you become,
if you will,
when you become somebody that's, messing up, right? Or doing things that are going to guarantee you a prison sentence or something. People praise you for that. My brother wasn't getting the same praise as me. And it gets, as a young boy coming up, right?
Right.
You have girls and all these other elements that come into the picture. And, you start, validating certain things with that, with that clout and stuff like that. So I started going to juvenile hall.
Yeah.
At a young age.
Were you still going to school, by the way? I want to know, was your relationship, or were you starting to did school?
I was very, very good in school. I never struggled in school, but at that point we were trying to, I still remember me and my cousin, my uncle had bought us some turntables, man. We wanted to be DJs, bro. We were trying to DJ. We had our techniques and a little bit of everything. We weren't full-fledged, like I said, this kind of just gradually kind of happened. Like every neighborhood was kind of unwritten rule of rivalries, right? It was kind of early stages. I was going to Taft High School in '87.
Really?
Yeah, man.
Same era as O'Shea Jackson.
I was getting bussed out there, bro, and I got arrested out there, man, and doing some dumb stuff, and got kicked out. And then ended up in juvenile hall. Then ended up in juvenile hall again, and before you know it, from one year to another, I was fully engulfed in a bad lifestyle, man.
Were you in a gang?
Yes.
Did you?
Yes.
So what was that turning point for you where you joined the gang?
It was just, here's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
All the kids on the block,
yeah,
we all grew up together, and the kids on the next block and the next block, we all knew each other, and nobody was actually looking to go join a gang. It just kind of turned into a gang. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, it just started off like that. It kind of gradually grew into you're on defense mode, you're on offense mode, or there's kids that don't like you no more because you live on this block, and it's just kind of one of those things. But, I did end up becoming part of a gang or part of the local gang there, and ended up, from juvenile hall to youth camp, to getting shot, in the femoral artery, going to camp again, and then ending up, in the hospital for a lot of time, spending pretty much my whole 11-month camp sentence. I think I stood for 9 or 10 months, but most of that was spent in the infirmary, locked in a room because I had blood clots in my femoral artery, and spent a lot of time at the USC Medical Center. They brought me down from camp. So,
and this is during your sentence?
During my sentence. I went to fire camp thinking, man, I'm going to work out and my leg's going to get better.
Yeah.
It actually backfired, and I ended up getting a blood clot in my leg. So, by then it was already 1989, and Mom's lost control of me, man. Mom's is still coming to see me. Mom's is never giving up, man. I always think she never gave up to the end,
Did you recognize that at the time, by the way? Were you're in this lifestyle, you see your mom's concern, her care, her pain?
I do,
probably.
I did recognize it.
Yeah.
But, here's an interesting thing, it's you're coming right back to an environment that's not really going to allow you to escape that lifestyle, bro. You know what I mean? I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
I've really paid attention to what it is that gives us this type of environment, right? You go back to it, it's pretty hard to just, what do? Go back home and shake all your friends. That's all you've ever known, right? There's no money to move out, bro. And you're probably safer in that neighborhood than moving to another neighborhood where nobody knows you, and then you're encountering even bigger problems. It's a very, very tricky
self-perpetuate
world to navigate, man. And my mother tried, her hardest. My aunties, my family never was the type to, give up on us or anything like that. My older brother and my younger brother never joined the gang, never got in trouble. They're both, we're total opposites, man. Both of my brothers are nerds, geeks, and I love them, man,
Right.
And I'm so happy that happened, and as much as we think, we love our environment or our gang or whatever it is that makes us think that way. I always knew immediately when I was young, I never want my brother to get involved with this. It's one of those things that I felt even though I wanted to escape it, I didn't know nothing else no more, bro. I couldn't. I had never left Pico-Union besides on a bus to a youth camp. Then I ended up in California Youth Authority, in 1990. So it was such a gradual, worse and worse thing. California Youth Authority, I'm kind of glad they closed them all down, right? It was like, considered gladiator school. I always feel like those places were, those places were set up to make us fail, man. Like they're really literally prepping you to end up in prison, man. You know what I mean? You get sent to those places. Nothing, man.
Not about that.
They have all these cool, I did finish school in there. But I did get into a lot of trouble in there, man. I got into so much trouble. I turned my sentence into a little bit of a longer sentence. And so one thing that stuck all the way through, I never stopped drawing all the way through.
Okay.
Envelopes, calligraphy on envelopes, writing. I mean, I still have letters. I should have brought one. I still have letters that I wrote to my mom with my early cursive penmanship. I've always been a big fanatic of penmanship, the discipline that comes with that beautiful writing. My mom had the nicest writing as well.
Really?
Yeah. But I always loved penmanship. I've always, since we were learning our ABCs, I remember trying to do like the cleanest, replication of alpha. I don't know if they still teach it in school of cursive writing, right? I was always
barely. They're at the very, I see what I said. They're at the very end where it's like kind of optional almost at this point, but it's a lost art. And before that, calligraphy, I mean, now you need to go to a specialist or a true artist. So you were working on the art. Let me ask you this. Was there an intent with it, or was it just your passion, something you loved, something you wanted to work on and be proud of for yourself?
Here's a dope thing that I feel, man, as I could feel here as we're talking about it.
Yeah.
I have this feeling inside, right? Like I've always had that passion for it. So before I made any money at it, before anything, I love doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's carried over to where I'm at today, right? What a beautiful thing that I stuck to something I love so much to build, what I have now in my hands would be considered, my empire, my miniature, empire.
Absolutely.
Built on lettering,
legacy,
right?
Man.
Yeah, built on something that was frowned upon before. Back then I was doing it. Everybody wanted me to do an envelope for their mom, for their girlfriend, a little greeting cards. And I could remember right now, for those lucky ones that got to trade me, some of my artwork for a stamp or even a ramen soup in California Youth Authority, right?
Yeah.
I would do, drawings on envelopes and drawings, and I've always practiced it. I loved it. It was and it still is like something that takes me into a different mind state. It's like peace or meditation for me.
Yeah.
So that never changed, right? And I feel like that was a very important thing when I started practicing art and even painting. I've taken sign graphics, which is sign painting. I've taken life drawing, marker indication, visual communications, all kind of things that have added more tools to my toolbox.
What do you mean you've taken like classes?
Right? I've
really?
taken classes on stuff.
Okay. When did that start, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
I've always, even in Hawaii, I was taking art classes at California Youth Authority. I've always looked through, I remember being in trouble there and being in what's considered like their solitary or the box. And the teacher there bringing me lettering books because I was scribbling on everything. You're like, wow, you letter nice. I had memorized.
They even said that back then.
Yeah, Old English alphabets and all this stuff. So it was cool. He brought me some books, and I remember even to this day, I memorized everything in that book, man. All the Old English fonts, all the old fonts and stuff like that. I had this crazy passion for like wanting to improve my lettering always, And this is 1991. And 1990, 1991, 1992,
So what was the culture like at that point in your interaction with the culture, whether it's writing, tagging, graffiti, anything like that? Because what you do is different, right? It's different. It's not the same, but there's still, I mean, again, for the uninitiated, like it overlaps. It falls under, let's call it the same umbrella. I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but how were you interacting? Because again, you had confidants, friends, people that were out there doing actual graffiti, like you said, bubble letters, stuff like that. How did that kind of all go together?
Man, Pico-Union was known for, there's a lot of iconic graffiti artists and artists that came out of Pico-Union. Prime is one of the most iconic graffiti artists and out of Pico-Union, but in the world, right? And me and him go back. He's one of those kids that was hanging out with me as I'm telling those stories since maybe second, third grade. We were already trying to do lettering. He was already, he's been a master at his craft for many decades, right? He's a mentor to me. I got a chance to meet Deffer way back in 89. And so their graffiti really inspired me, their graffiti art. You know what I mean? I feel like mine's became a little bit of both. It took inspiration from, the gang graffiti, gang calligraphy, penmanship, from looking at a lot of calligraphy books and mixing it in to develop my own unique hybrid styles of lettering, right? It's a little bit of everything. It didn't have a name. I don't really know that it even has a name now. It's still developing, bro.
I keep seeing lettering, right? Whenever you look up Big Sleeps, it's like a pioneer of the lettering style, like, how do you explain that? Like you even just said, like, it's not necessarily the right name or a name. Why do you think it kind of took that?
You know what's a good name for it, man?
What?
Indigenous Los Angeles letter forms, bro.
That's dope.
The lettering that I practice comes from Los Angeles. And here's a true testament to, like, no matter what art form or how it starts, right? You could go back and think of, like, maybe bad art. I mean, art that was considered that they were using it as propaganda during World War II, right? Those were amazing illustrations and artists. What it was being used for doesn't take away the talent of the artist that was creating it, right?
Well said. Okay.
So some of the early, influence of my writing may have been looked at as gang writing, right? Because it was being practiced by the kids, but not only the kids, by all the people in those areas. They all know how to write. Yeah. L.A. has that hand, right? So special dialect that comes from Los Angeles. And a friend of mine said, you know what? These letter forms are indigenous to L.A. By the way, even the Getty Research Institute recognized, my work, mine and Prime's work. My book just got inducted into the Getty Research Institute Library, Letters to Live By Volume 3. So I think it's a testament to sticking to something, all the way through. I saw this all the way through, and I left that phase where it was looked at in a bad way, right? I looked at it. Right. The gang culture is not the way it was in L.A. And that art form way exceeded that era of, the writing took off into a different world, right? And it started being practiced by somebody that reformed, right? That turned their life around and being used. Had I dumped that right then and there when I changed my life and said, I don't want to draw like that. But I was so already entrenched into my passion for lettering. I wanted to find ways to evolve it and say, man, how can I incorporate this into this and not lose the authenticity to this letter form? I always thought, from inside. Yeah, I mean, when I took sign painting, my teachers were like, David, you're back at that scribbling again, right? Like, we had a really good relationship. My typography teacher was like, that's not typography. That's, not considered letter form. But to me, it was important because it defined a special era of me. It awoke in that passion for lettering as a young kid. So I always held it dear, right, to my heart, man. And I feel like it carried over. And when I was finally able to see light at the end of the tunnel, right, and leave behind a very negative lifestyle, this was one of the things that helped me cross that path, bro. Okay, so it really helped me cross that path and stay out of trouble, because nothing else that I can bring back besides lessons of telling people not to go back and join the gang and all that. If anything that stuck, from the early stages is the way we wrote on the walls, like those letter forms, the discipline. I think I just learned from that, but I evolved it into a full form of a different type of art. And it guided you through. And then, so let's talk about that inflection point. Rejuvenation, redemption, rehabilitation, for lack of a better term. What was there a moment? Was there an epiphany after you've been incarcerated multiple times, shot multiple times? Yeah, correct. Times, so, what point were you like, "Yo, I gotta just leave that behind. Take the important piece of you and your passion, your soul, your heart, the culture that you're able to express in such a unique and beautiful fashion." And accelerate that, but leave all the other stuff behind that was, frankly, like pulling down your life and, a negative influence on your life. Yeah. Now when I look at everything, I feel like, there's nothing we could do to change our past, right? So, we walk down these dark paths and some make it out, some don't. I have people that went away and are still incarcerated after 30 plus years, right? Some of them spent decades in solitary confinement, whatever. So here's something that I see, like, because I made it through, I want to make sure that I use that lesson, you know, in a very special way, right? I'm like thinking, you know, what does this whole thing mean, that what I'm carrying right now? I'm carrying so much knowledge, so many mistakes that were made, but I'm also carrying, you know, like the drive to, I already overcame and learned how to overcome the urge to go back to a negative lifestyle. I left that lifestyle, right? Me and my wife, you know, we're like dating in 1998, 99, and we stopped talking for a few years. And I don't want to get super deep into the back end of years and years of that story, but you know, like leaving the gang and all this stuff. But I do want to say, like, when she came back around in 2004, 2005, we hadn't spoken in years. She found me at my worst. My mother had passed away.
Yeah.
I had gotten rearrested. You know, I was trying to do art. I was never stopped drawing all the way through, even when I hit, you know, my highest highs and lowest lows, like never. My mom had died of cancer. And that was really tough because up until when she passed, there was never a time that I could say, like, she didn't get to see me leave that lifestyle yet. You know what I mean? I was trying, but I couldn't shake it, man. You know what I mean? I got involved in a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs and doing artwork, right? For Psycho Realm, which are born and raised in Pico-Union. Well, they're from Pico-Union, bro. Right. Those are my friends. Those are the guys that brought me on. They commissioned me to do my first lettering project, Sick Jacket.
Really?
Yeah. We go way back, bro, you know.
Wait, so was that your first paid? That was your first paid?
First project? Actual paid project, Sick Jacket, and Duke hit me up to do some lettering for them, man. And I had no idea how to price that stuff. Yeah, right. Nothing. I'm on the prison pricing system of like, you know, shoot me $20, shoot me $40.
Ramen and
whatever, man.
Oh, yeah.
And Jack, you know, took it upon himself to say, man, we love your stuff. You know, I was incarcerated when they released their first album, but they actually, Jack, you know, was able to pull me to the side and say, hey, bro, you got a talent. Both of them, you know, Gustavo, he wasn't shot at that point yet. Like, you got to do something with this talent. Never stop telling me that, you know? And, you know, he's like, this is how much I'm going to pay you for it. This is what, you know, this is what the going rate is. And for me, I was like, holy shit, you know what I mean? And then come work, you know, later on, he's like, hey, I got you some logo work for Tina Marie. I got you some logo work for, you know, another group and Street Platoon. And so things evolve fast, you know? Yeah. But at that time, I was still living in the neighborhood.
Right.
So it's almost like you're kind of double dipping, right? Like,
two lives.
It's very hard to do good when you're in the company of bad, right? And I'm not blaming anybody for my I'm fully accountable.
But you're a product of your environment.
Everything I do.
It's the truth. Yeah.
But, you know, because I struggle with addiction and all these things, it's very hard. You know, you're walking straight and then you swerve off to the left or to the right and you're back at square one. You know, one of the things that I find very special is what I say, God's had his hand on my shoulder this whole time because I've never given up, bro. I've never saw like, that's it. My life's over. I always had hope because my mom always said, you know, you're going to get out of this stuff. Like always, you know, and I'll just tap into like, I was fighting a life sentence in 1993 and, I thought I was done. Never thought I was coming home. And, she's like, you're coming home. And I felt bad telling my mother, like, no, mom, like, I'm not coming back. You know, I had got shot and you know, separate times. And I thought, you know, for sure they have all this case stacked up against us and this crazy incident happened. And my mom was right. You know, there was hope and she never looked at the negative side of things. She had hope and prayed every day. And I felt like that kind of instilled into me, right? I had this way of seeing things like no matter how bad things got, I never gave up on anything, bro. I always knew like I had this little, even though the flame might have been flickering this low, bro, like it was going to come back. Somebody was going to come and fan it. And that was my wife, bro. She came back around in 2005 and found me at my worst. Out of nowhere, she showed up one day looking for me. And, you know, I saw her and I lit up, man. By that time, I was very sick with diabetes, going through like a, you know, depressed state because my mother had passed. And I was just down, like really down, fighting a new gun case, waiting to, you know, possibly take an 18-year deal. And then it went down to like 12. I don't even remember the details. It's just so much things going on. But, you know, the opportunity to go and stay with my wife came back. You know, I lit up when I saw her. I was like, wow, like she brought some hope into my life, man. And, you know, she came to see me. You know, she was going through her own stuff at that time. And, me leaving Pico-Union for a few months to go stay with her, you know, in her apartment, gave me some mental clarity. I was fighting a case that I ended up getting I ended up doing a year sentence for, right? Instead of taking the 18-year deal. Yeah. I didn't give up on it. I fought it and I fought it and I fought it. And, you know, after 2 years, they sentenced me to 2 years with halftime. I knew that I wanted to change my life, bro. Like I knew inside something. I had this crazy, like, man, I still can't find the right words to express that. I had this feeling of like guilt or like kind of disappointment in myself. Yeah. But I knew there was something there just waiting, right? Like, and, when they gave me that sentence and everybody thought, they're like, oh, this fool's going to flee, right? Everybody knows the old sleeps, right? Yeah. And she knew I wasn't going to turn myself in. The judge sentenced me and he actually told me, you know, if it was up to me, I would let you go home, but I have to sentence you, you know, to this 2 years with halftime. I still had the audacity to ask him, can I go home for a couple of weeks? And, you know, he let me do it, man. He
really?
My mother's stuff.
Okay.
And because she had just passed and we put it away. And, I knew when I so I had to turn myself in 3 weeks later. And when I turned myself in, I knew that I was shedding when I walked in there and I turned myself into the CCB, I was shedding the skin right there. I didn't know what was coming or nothing, but I knew something, it's a very, very tricky feeling of like something just clicked. I was done, bro.
So that was the epiphany.
I was done right there. I knew it. Like never had I felt it when I was fighting a life sentence, when I was dying on the operating table, getting brought back with, you know, tubes being put into my chest because I couldn't breathe. And never that time I knew I was done. Like something just hit.
So behind every good man is a better, stronger woman.
Yeah, right? There is, man.
Why do you think she came back?
My looks, bro.
Mr. Handsome over here.
Man. No. I think we had a special connection. Yeah. It was just the wrong time. Yeah. Even my mother loved her, man. You know, my mother was never a hypocrite, man. And she would, you know, give her advice and say, what are you doing with my son, man? He's trouble. And I was trouble at that time, bro. You know what I mean? I wasn't ready for anything. You know, I was very selfish and very blinded by you know, the lifestyle I was caught up in, you know what I mean? And it's very crazy to think, you know, here I am going to Trade Tech College, taking, you know, graphic design classes, going home with a portfolio and getting chased at the bus stop, or some guys are there with a gun trying to see if they could catch me slipping, getting off the Washington bus on Hoover, and me still going to school and asking the teacher for a ride, right? Doc Guthrie, rest in peace. Wow. The sign graphics teacher there. You know, he's like, David, nobody's waiting for you. I'm like, take me, man. You know, I'll show you, bro. And me and him had a very special friendship. I ended up taking his class a few years later, but I was trying to escape something and I just couldn't do it from within, right? Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like I couldn't get out of that little thing. But once I was given that chance to get out of the environment, when my mind was ready, my heart was ready, everything that I have experienced in my life all just hit me at once. And I knew, I'm like, this has to be like that time when I'm going to elevate, right? But I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know, like,
there's no plan.
How do you know how to change your life? I don't know how to change my life. All I knew was Pico-Union, bro. That's it. Nothing else. Pico-Union is all that I knew at that time, man. So, but I knew I didn't want to get in trouble no more. I still had my aunties around and, you know, my family and people that believed in me. And people that were friends that weren't really friends, that were, you know, bringing me free drugs and doing all this stuff. Because they were looking out for me in their eyes, right? By the way that the hood thinks, like, you know, there's people that'll say, man, I got you, bro. You know, let me double up the free drugs I'm going to give you this time. Even though you're down already at your worst. Yeah. But that's just the mentality, right? And I'm taking all donations at that time, bro, right? So, little did I know, man, that, you know, me and her were going to build something special, man. When I got out, when I walked in, I knew something was going to change. When I went in there, I drew every single day. I have every single envelope. I drew everything. I drew every day, bro. It's like I just put myself
working
into a
on
test
the craft
every day.
Focused, sinking yourself into it, getting better, developing
1 year,
styles. Yeah.
1 year felt long, bro. I had been away for 3 years and then another like close to 3 years. But this year felt long. Like it was a reflective time. It was a time to really, really process like, what am I going to do with myself? I had already been tattooing in shops before, relapsed and left shops. But this time, when I came home, I knew, I said, I'm not going to mess this up. I'm not going to mess this up. You know what I mean? What that consists of, I didn't know yet. Yeah. But I knew that I had it in me to leave everything behind and just try something different, right? And that's what it was. Little did I know that, everything was going to play out in such a slow and meticulous way. We had $300 saved up. That's what my girl saved up.
Right.
And with that,
after you got out?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
My mom had got buried. My cousins, keep in mind, my cousins had paid for my attorneys. My auntie bailed me out, and they paid for my mom's funeral. So I had nothing, bro.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to ask them for anything. Even though I know they probably would have given it to me or helped me out.
Yeah.
My girl, like, I got $300 saved up. What do we do? Buy a tattoo machine. And I'm like, do I buy a machine or an airbrush? And we chose a machine, and her sister bought me the airbrush, and I went to work every day. And,
where from? From your place or? You have a shop or what?
We started looking around.
Yeah.
We started looking around, and we found the shop around the corner. Man, I was living in Inglewood. We found the shop around the corner, and I got hired, bro. I got hired at that shop, and 2 years went by fast. Like 2 years in there, every day working. Shout out to my homie Mario, man, for hiring me there.
Were you able to do your art? I know tattoos are obviously what the client.
I do everything, bro. At that time, I wasn't. I hadn't really. I'm gonna be honest, bro. That little lettering movement that exists right now, not everybody was very hip to those letter forms yet. In the hoods, you find it way more sought after, but the general public, they're looking for a certain type of tattoo. So I'm at a walk-in shop, and I had worked at multiple shops that even had partnerships in shops with friends before. Back in the days, that was a whole completely different crazy episode we could talk about later. But, I was doing everything that came through the door, man. I do a fairy and two names and a crown and a rosary and whatever came through the door, I did it,
Okay, so that was working. That was paying some bills. You were staying clean. I
had an ankle monitor on, bro, and I was reporting to my parole officer, high control. Some people see that as like, man, that sucks that you have that bracelet on. To me, bro, that was looking at it from me and my wife's perspective. That was a very, very big blessing in disguise.
See that?
There was no wiggle room. Like, how bad do you want to stay out? Do you want to go? And, that really kept me like, it's like a magnet. I got to go home at this time. 2 years went by faster than you can count it, man.
Yeah.
And I made, so much money, by the standards of being at a walk-in shop, built so much clientele, learned so much, drew up Letters to Live By Volume 1 while I was in that shop, released it, and that changed the whole dynamics of something else. Little did I know that journey, right? Like, to feel like, all right, I'm going to just go full throttle into this tattooing and art or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Was going to give me and my wife the opportunity to learn about business, build an empire of, art in museums, workshops with kids, collaborations with major brands, and just so many, owning our own pigment company, right? There's so many things that came from me turning my life around and using art as that catalyst, right? Like using, first the discipline to stay out of trouble, right?
Right.
And leaving.
Right.
Had I gone back and started double dipping into the negative lifestyle, hanging out with my homies, it's never the homies, but me putting myself in an environment where something might happen or trouble might pop off, I know to stay away from them. I'm not staying away from them, because I don't still have some type of love for them as friends. We grew up together, but because the environment that, they hang out in, or that environment consists of things that could put me back in jail, and I refuse ever to go back. Like, that's it. That chapter of my life, when I made that decision, I said, it's over. Like, I'll diffuse any situation, de-escalate anything that comes my way, anything. There's no ego involved or, oh, this guy's mad dog and looking at you funny. Like, let him look, bro. Like, there's nothing ever that's going to draw me back to a mentality of like, I've overcame all that type of stuff.
And that's lessons
Yeah,
learned.
bro.
That's discipline. So, okay, so you're at the tattoo shop, getting a little nest egg. What was the inspiration for Letters to Live by the way? How did that even come about?
That's a crazy one. I had sent my wife, bro, so much artwork and lettering and drawings. She was building up this little cool black portfolio with all my stuff in it.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way.
Yeah.
Letters to Live by.
Let me open it up real quick. Yeah. This is interesting, man. This is a very interesting. See the envelopes?
Yeah.
So what she did.
Hold that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait. Oh, it's this way. This way. You know, she built up a little portfolio for me, and I started using it at the tattoo shop, right? I had no portfolio of any pictures of my tattoos or anything like that. People knew I had tattooed Sick Jackin' before, and, you know, they knew all this, you know, hood reputation, right, that I had of like kind of known amongst the neighborhood or whatever. But the inspiration came from her. One day we're walking through an expo, and she sees like a lettering book on the table, and she's looking at it, and, you know, she's my biggest fan, supporter, everything, bro. Like,
absolutely.
Pushing me into the fire, always like, man, you got to go in the deep end, right? Miss Sleeps. Mm-hmm. And she's like, man, I'm just saying, your letters are way better than this. Like, nobody's doing this shit, you know, like your letter forms.
Yeah.
She already had the portfolio out, man, and, you know, for me, like in a little black portfolio.
Okay.
And we ventured into a journey to do a book, you know. And we ended up with a book in our hands that we couldn't even afford to print. You know, I've told this story before. It's like, we didn't have the money to print 100 books at that time. And we were like, who the hell's going to buy 100 books?
Yeah. Yeah.
Little did we know that the universe, you know, was giving us that opportunity to see if, you know, nobody would help us. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know anything about that. And we found ourselves with a book in our hand, and a friend of mine named Wendy Belzel that came and helped us. And those 100 books turned into, you know, a couple hundred more, and then thousands, and then more volumes, and then doors opening up that opened other doors. And it just became, you can never look at that one single thing. I think we need to understand that sometimes there's certain things that we're doing in our career that are baby steps. You didn't just end up on top of a mountain, right?
No.
We're baby stepping our way, you know, one book, another book, a small collaboration, right? You know, I did a collaboration with my friend OG Abel on a t-shirt. And that was validation for me, man. I love that dude's stuff, and always, and he hit me up to do a collaboration with him.
Yeah.
And to me, to this day, that's still one of my favorite collaborations. He had never done a collaboration with anyone. For those that know OG Abel, right?
Yeah.
He's a legend in the game too, man, right? In the airbrush game and all that. Those were all small things that I wasn't looking at any big picture. Little did I know, you know, more and more of those things were aligning themselves, right? It wasn't just tattooing anymore. Things were coming into my lap, you know, because of the book, and because of doing a small collaboration, because of doing a little project with my homeboy Deffer, that were opening up doors behind the scenes.
And every little one of those adds to your opportunity, right? Because
Always.
You're getting more exposure, you're working with people, and your work's just getting seen and noticed.
Yeah.
And then each one becomes a different rung of the ladder that as you're climbing up one by one by one.
Yeah. And you know, the opportunities were coming fast, right?
Yeah.
And I think I was ready. I had this fire burning, and that thing was just fanning the flames, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just kept thinking, like, man, this is the top of the mountain. Man, this is the best ever. Little did I know there was way more coming, right? Way more, you know, financial gain, you know, doors opening up for traveling and for doing things. And the first time they hit me up, hey, would you like to come talk to the kids? You know, we gifted them some of your lettering books. And I'm like, man, what am I going to tell them? Like, you know, Deffer hit me up and he said, hey, you know, I have a cousin in Santa Monica that has these kids and they want to meet you. I'm like, meet me?
That's so dope.
And I was nervous, and my wife's like, you got to do it. Like, we have to do it. And when I went, and I still remember, man, I have pictures on my phone with that. I knew that this book was going to open up that door. Very simple book, right? Just a bunch of my lettering, a lot of tags, a lot of things. It was meant to be a reference guide for tattooers to buy it that were intrigued with the letter forms that weren't really seen anywhere else but LA, right? I felt like my book was very authentic.
Yeah.
I practiced and lived that lifestyle and practiced those letter forms since I was a young boy. So who better to bring you Indigenous Los Angeles letter forms, right? There's somebody that lived it, right? So that opened up that door with the kids, which became something that's one of the most powerful things going on in our lives right now is our workshops with the youth. And it all started from that little idea.
I want to get to those workshops because that's important. But that first time, tell me about that first time that you're speaking to the kids. You didn't know what to, or you didn't know what you were going to say or how they were going to receive you.
They were bugged out with the lettering, and
obviously they were looking up to you. Yeah, for sure. How did that feel, especially knowing where you came from and your background and when you were a kid?
You know, one of the things that really stuck, bro, and I want to share this with great importance. I'm looking at some of those kids, man. I have a very, very keen sense of who might, just by the way they dress and talk, who might already be dabbling in with the wrong crowd, bro. Yeah. I saw a couple of those kids that probably have the potential to already be following, in the wrong footsteps, right? We're influenced by our peers, our surroundings, and I'm like, man, this is a good chance to talk to them, right? I started talking about, I drew a lot of this while I was in jail. That's why I'm out trying to do good. And immediately I started pulling from my past to send the message of like, how to not end up in those shoes, right? And Letters to Live By, when we did the book, we didn't have a name for it. I actually called my brother and said, hey, I got a book, bro. My little brother, and like, what should I name it? Me and my wife were trying to think, and he's like, let me call you back. And he called me back a few minutes later, like, Letters to Live By. That's what you do, since I could remember, like, you live by lettering every day.
That's dope.
So, yeah, I was like, wow, okay, boom. Yeah, I was like, I couldn't have thought of a better name. And it ended up becoming a movement, right? Letters to Live By became a hashtag, a movement, a clothing brand, kind of unintentionally a clothing brand, right? With all these artists like Chaz Bojorquez, Weiner, Deffer, Prime, everybody doing Letters to Live By designs for me. It became...
How did that feel, getting those kind of, that respect, accolades, if you will, but from your peers?
Oh, man, amazing, bro. Amazing. I'm going to be honest. Yeah. I think in the beginning, and this is a very unfortunate thing that happens, man. When you leave an environment like that, not to blame anyone or come back to that in a negative way, but I feel like people judge you, and especially because you've been a certain way for your whole life. Yeah. But I feel like there was a lot of people waiting for me to fumble, bro. You know what I mean? A lot. Man. People that I would consider friends from elementary school or whatever, waiting for me to fumble, or, making side comments or thinking. But I learned, man, and I said, you know what? I did a shirt called Success is the Best Revenge, right? To me, I was like, I'm so focused on the prize. Yeah. If I go back and have to put out all these small fires, I'm never going to reach my destination, right?
Distraction and waste of time. Yep.
I'm just stepping, never, I've had a couple chats with people that, had questions about things, but I've learned, and I said, how do I break that, man? How do we get this, how do we break that crab in a bucket mentality? And it's probably going to be impossible to break a crab in a bucket mentality in the hood, right? But by me coming in to Pico-Union, about 9 years ago, and one day telling my wife, man, I got all these art supplies and all these things sitting here. We should go to the park and use them with the kids during the summer program. Because we've already done a couple workshops with different youth, right? By then we had already done several, and that turned into an annual event, right? That first started with like a group of kids on one table, and then 20 kids, and it just morphed into, now we're getting the whole park. And the street closed off with different, different people there coming, bringing resources into Pico-Union.
And just real quick, if I could interject, how much different is this than the era when you were growing up? Like you talked about, honestly, gangs infest L.A. You asked if I know about the gang culture. No, not intimately. I grew up in the Valley. There's gangs. It's not the same. But I grew up in that era where you hear the narrative, obviously the Daryl Gates, Boys in the Hood, movies. Yeah. You see that kind of stuff. But even just now as an adult doing what I do, looking back and reflecting on the number of homicides and just the number of gangs and crime. And it's definitely a different place and a different atmosphere. Not to say it doesn't exist, because it's still a real thing in it. But the opportunity for these youth that you're creating to kind of give them the outlet and let them see that there is this future and this path Whereas when you were growing up, you know what I mean? Like it went from football and breakdancing to all of a sudden, before you know it, those are gangs and friendly rivalries turned into life or death rivalries, you know, and now you got kids at the park that are able to have these extracurricular activities that are productive and uplifting, and you're facilitating that. And that's coming from where you come from. Like, how does that feel? Same neighborhood, like giving back to the community in your home. I mean,
it's a blessing, bro. It's, you know, we do these projects and with museums and all these great things. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, man, things have been amazing for us, right?
Yeah.
Given the fact that I'm struggling with, you know, my health and everything, nothing takes my eye off the prize. I feel like if all my life story full circle came back and put me in this position to do this, bro, like to do these things, to do these workshops. These are during the summer night light program, right? Because unfortunately, you know, some of those neighborhoods, you wouldn't be able to do those type of workshops, you know, where the cops or, you know, whether the gang unit wasn't there to kind of oversee things like that. But they've grown every year. They've given us a chance to bring other artists in from around the city.
Yeah.
People are flying in from New Jersey to come paint with the kids.
Yeah.
All the kids in that neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods know they're taking home a collaboration canvas with like OG Slick, with Prime, with Norm, rest in peace. It's such an amazing feeling, bro. Like there's no other greater reward than that, to know that you're able to come back and, you know, it's not a paycheck, right? It's not something, we don't have a nonprofit, bro. Me and my wife don't own a nonprofit. So people think like, wow, your nonprofit's amazing. We're like, we don't have a nonprofit. We've been doing this because we knew it was the right thing to do. We're gearing up for a nonprofit, right? But we know that we could do even greater things if we put our heads together to get bigger resources. But right now, it's all been us. Yeah. You know, the early funding all came from us, pinching our pennies and doing whatever we can. And the reward has been great, man. We've, you know, used our tattooers, man. They got love from a lot of people, right? We put out a post, and a lot of people want to help when it comes to that. There's been a lot of people that want to reach out and, you know, hey, we need food. Boom, we have people that want to come and do stuff. And my wife's been, you know, the past 3 years, she grew it from this size to like full blown, where the mayor's office is involved, and they gave us a word of recognition, and it's been amazing. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes helping us now, like doing all the crazy things, like, you know, setting up every little thing and breaking it down by a certain time.
Why do you think the culture, the community, LA has evolved like that, to go from criminalizing and villainizing that same work to embracing it and promoting it?
That's a good question, man. I feel like a lot of people, you know, I mean, there was definitely a different era, right? But I also feel like, you know, a lot of people don't have a fair shot growing up in the neighborhood. Like, you know, if the cops said you were a gang member, you were a gang member. Even the kids that were just wearing a white T-shirt sometimes, you know, they were labeling my brother as a gang member. He's like, I ain't no damn gang member, bro. Like, my brother is the farthest thing from a gang member, but he's walking in a gang neighborhood. He might have a T-shirt on. Like, there's so many things that are stacked up against us.
Yeah.
You know, not to say that there wasn't a lot of gangs and a lot of things, but there's a lot of odds stacked against us growing up in those places, right? And I mean, you could look at the statistics, man. LA was very bad in those eras, right? I think first of all, the gang culture died down a lot. You know, unfortunately, that probably means that everybody's still incarcerated, right? Everybody went away.
Right.
I have friends that got wrongfully convicted during the Rampart scandal, man, which is still heartbreaking to know that they're still sitting behind bars after 20-something years, still trying to get out, right?
Man.
I honestly think, you know, that all the elements, there's a lot of people that are getting out, a lot of more people that are providing resources, programs. I know several people that are, you know, parolees or people that got out from doing long sentences that immediately dove right into helping youth. There are a lot of reasons. I'm not saying that's the only reason.
Yeah, but it all helps and it all adds up.
I just feel like there's a lot of things working at the same time in unison to bring forth that type of thing. I want to be a small part of that, bro. I want to use my story, and I want to use, you know, everything that I have. I know for sure that when I walk into the juvenile hall, right, to talk to the kids in Orange County Juvenile Hall or something, those kids listen, bro. I look like them. I look like their big homie, probably, right?
Yeah.
So there's power in that. I could talk to them and give them that message, man. It's worked. I've gone, with a couple friends and my wife to go and spend, a pre-Christmas dinner with them and have a long chat and draw all their names and have conversations. The drawing is the icebreaker, right? We go in there, man, let me draw something for you. What do you want? Everybody, it's either going to be their girlfriend's name or their mom's name, right? And I'm like, I've said, why don't you want anybody ask for your homie's name? Like their homies is the last thing on their plate, right? Little do they know that, we get incarcerated. Our homies ain't going to be there for us, right? It's going to be the people that really, really love you. Some friends might write you a letter or whatever, but all in all, man, to go back and think of like, family is what's there for us, right? Family is what supports us. We got to create a community where we're supporting each other a little bit more now, right? Like my goal, is to go to the park and try to provide even a little bit of inspiration to the kids that are there. There's still gang members that come and they want to kind of help a little bit. Yeah. And hey, maybe they're getting a seed planted. I have some homies from the neighborhood that come and help, and they've done great, bro. Like they're really coming in there and helping us. I mean, some of them, they dedicate a lot of time and effort, and we rely on them, right? Like they're really vision as to like, man, I want to help. You know what I mean? So it's giving them a taste of something else, and then someone else sees them helping and they want to help. So this last one that we did the year before was amazing because it brought, different people from different neighborhoods there and no drama. There's never been an incident. There's never been anything. Even by crash unit, they were like, bro, you guys self-police each other so well. We're just on the sidelines. That's awesome. But it's amazing to have them there supporting us, right?
I want to get to the point where you really were on the escalator to success, the elevator to success, because after these little victories with the book, and then you're getting every rung in the ladder, where did it turn into you're flying internationally to do tattoos or murals or be in museums and have a permanent exhibit in the Natural History Museum? And like you said, in the Getty, like your work is in the Getty. How did that happen? Because it's a big deal,
it's a big leap.
Just turning your life from incarceration to having a steady job and then turning that steady job into something where you're now making income on the side because of your creation. But now we're talking a global level and the artist that is Big Sleeps. How did that all come about?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I'm still dissecting that, bro. But, I honestly believe, man, I was like this, bro. I had my eyes to the canvas, right? The whole time.
Yes. Right.
Praying every night. The best support system in the world. I never looked at one thing that made me feel like I hit the top, right? Everything that I did, it was like, a small trophy or, it feels good to say like, wow, this person bought my canvas for X amount of dollars. And then, like for somebody that was trading their artwork for, bartering out for a couple bags of coffee or something,
right?
To even get a few $100s is amazing, but to get thousands of dollars for a piece of art, and then to start showing in galleries with Deffer and Cryptic and Chaz.
Was that crazy being in galleries, man? Like, yeah, man. For real.
I'll tell you a good story, right? I think surrounding myself with the right people. Me and my wife always we always do huddles, right? Like to see where we're at with everything. We went from knocking on tattoo shop doors, trying to sell our book, to people ordering, tons of them, and then a couple of museums hitting us up, to being invited into like a couple of art shows, with friends like Deffer and Prime and all the guys, and then a collaboration. And I think instead of backing away from those offers, because I'm not going to lie, for somebody that's never done that type of stuff, everything felt scary.
It's intimidating.
Everything felt like butterflies were like locusts in my stomach.
Yeah.
Oh, not just butterflies. But one of the things that I brought in from my past was, you weren't afraid of all the crazy stuff you've survived and been through, right? I've survived everything, bro. Yeah. Like, I've literally been there ready to tip over, and go to the other side, and came back from it. And, I just used that as I'm like, how scary could it really be to say yes to a project, right?
Yeah.
So I started just facing that. And then, even with the kids, it felt scary, like nervous. I'm not a speaker, bro.
Yeah, by far, right?
Fool me, right? Yeah. I'm not, man. And I just said, I'm just going to take on everything, And I'll ask my wife always, like, should I take it? We analyze. And it's crazy because she's been able to pick out a few that weren't like something that we thought was worth it. And it ended up being like, we're glad that we didn't do that. But it kind of morphed slowly, right? Being around the right people. And I'm going to touch on something that I felt was one of the most important things that really brought that elevation forth, right? I used to be ashamed of my past. When we first did a couple art shows, right, I was like, man, I don't want to share all this stuff, right? These people that I'm probably going to sell some art to, they're going to hear my past and bug out.
Yeah.
And they're not going to, like, why would they even want to mess with me, right? But I'm already turned my life around, right? The redemption was already I was already here.
Absolutely.
It was learning how to deliver a story of, coming from this hardship to such a beautiful place and a beautiful mindset, like giving them my whole story, even tapping into the ugly side of the story, and giving them a full story of that redemption really laid the groundwork for people to accept me like not just a cool tattooer, but a tattooer that's been through years and years. I painted the Pico-Union mural with a few friends in 1990. I mean, I was 16 years old. The memorial wall that has all the kids that were murdered in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I have decades of stuff under my belt, but I didn't know how to use it yet. And I had never been confronted with, speaking to art collectors. Now we had the kids, now we have art collectors. And then I'm getting hit up by a potential museum, like to come and do a wall. And they don't really know who I am yet.
Yeah.
But they know I grew up around there. And then me giving them my full story. Not only did they do the wall, they kept it as a permanent installation at the Natural History Museum, right?
Which is incredible.
Meeting the Getty Research Institute, Marcia Reed and David Brofman, the curator of rare books. And just for those that know or don't know what the Getty Research Institute library is, it's a big deal, right?
Absolutely.
For me to actually, have the right to say my books just got inducted into the Getty Research Institute library feels so good, because that gives a chance to other people that are coming up to really burn that oil and say, man, I really want to, like, what's going to light your fire, right? Is it going to be the story of sleeps overcoming all this and, making it to these levels? Nothing came easy, but nothing seemed hard. You know why? Because I was following my passion, bro, and my gut. And when I overcame the ugly feeling of talking in front of people and kind of sharing that story, I kind of got the hang of it. And I just said, I'm just going to speak from here. I'll never script something on a piece of paper because I'll catch myself trying to remember what I was going to say. Everything comes, I can't go wrong because everything comes from here. I might be off on a date or something, but as long as it's coming from in here, I mean, how can I go wrong, right?
And I think people respond more than anything, no matter who it is.
Yeah, bro.
Like authenticity, genuine realness, man. Like people want to know that story. They want to feel that heart. And again, that's what comes through whenever we talked on the phone multiple times, like we've had conversations, and it's just the authenticity and being a genuine person. And like you said, from your heart, from your soul, that's what inspires. And I think that's why people respond. So yeah, the art, the kids, brand deals. Now
so much.
Now that's crazy because again, a street artist, tattoo artist. Did you ever think that you'd be working with Hurley, Nike, Adidas, like companies like that?
Nothing, man. I mean, we just started getting emails, bro. Like, here's another thing that I learned early on.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to put myself in a position to, I'm a humble guy, bro. Like, I don't think I'm better than any other artist. I just said, I'm going to work so hard at what I do that the law of attraction, right? People are going to come to me, bro. Like, that's kind of what set the standard early on. And emails just started pouring in, man. I remember Travis Barker hit me up to do the Famous Stars and Straps collab. And I was like, wow, man, like, let's get it, bro. I ended up doing a mural for him. He's the coolest dude ever, man. That's the homie. And then, Hurley hit me up to do a collaboration with them. And, I didn't go to business school, but I got my, I'm street savvy.
Right.
I got that hustle, man. And with my wife's, discipline and the way she sees things, we powerhoused everything that has come along. You know what I mean? The brand deals came and we learned very fast, along the lines of that. I was building a tattoo machine brand with my homeboy Norm, rest in peace, and trying to experiment with our own tattoo pigment company. And so many things started evolving for us. And it's always been like one simple rule for us: let's pray on it. And if it's meant for us, it's going to happen, bro. Like, Nothing else. Nothing has been forced. I've never gone knocking on the door for somebody like, oh, please let me get this collab, bro. Like I could do better than this guy. Nothing. If it comes to me, that means God put it out in my path, right? And I did the best that I can with every single collaboration. I've done the best. And one of the things I learned early on, this is for me. I mean, I don't know if it's satisfying something special or something that goes back to, you know, my wanting to bring recognition to Pico-Union. Yeah. You know, I feel like it's a very historical place, but to the art that existed there. And we're going to touch on the canvas that I gave you, but I wanted to keep the raw authenticity. When I started elevating like that, I said, I know that the letter forms that I'm giving these companies, they need to be recognized. They need to be, people need to know I did them. I don't want to sell a letter form to somebody and they're like, oh man, Hurley has this dope letter form, or whoever, or Adidas did a collab with Sleeps, or an activation with Sleeps, and nobody knows who did it. I made sure my logo went on the Hurley collab, on the Famous Stars and Straps collab, on everything. And when it came to paintings, like the Natural History Museum painting and all that, I made sure that I tapped into the backgrounds and brought forth some of the textures that I remember as a kid, you know, painting in Pico-Union in the alleys. Those rusty looking textures in the background of my paintings and all that. Yeah. That's the alleyways behind my mom's house, or, you know, behind the Yum Yum Donut factories.
You want to bring this out right now? Should we bring this out right now? Let's check this out.
Bring it out, man. Very special piece, man. And it's been in my collection since 2016. I feel like 2016 was probably my greatest painting era, like the metamorphosis, when I evolved full-fledged into, like, I felt like I understood what I wanted to do with it.
Right.
All these textures and all this drippiness and all these things, I'm bringing forth what I remember the walls looked like when I was painting, right? I kept that authenticity, that rawness. This is a big old LA done with a calligraphy brush, or with a big, like, brush, using ink. And guess what? Because I learned how to paint on an imperfect, you know, canvas and surface, and, you know, there was writing under it that already existed and all that. Boom. Here's the LA, right? For LA in a minute, bro. Los Angeles. 213 is the original area code.
LA, yeah.
Downtown. And it has a couple words through there. I can't make them out right here, but West Adams, right? It has historical places. In my paintings, man, I try to bring forth, before the lettering, I try to set a mood, bro. I try to set something that the person could really connect with, the colors, with everything. Then I put the lettering on it. And I never do it from here, bro. I never do it. It all comes from
right
here. Also, this is a special gift to LA in a minute, brother.
Thank you.
A Bit Sleeps original right there, man.
Thank you very much, dude.
For those that asked me for that painting before, sorry, but
this will be honored and recognized and cherished, man. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think it's important, bro, to really touch on that little part. You know, a lot of people ask about the textures and they think I'm just splatting paint. Prime was one of my greatest mentors. I mean, still is. Him and Deffer. You know, they're very iconic artists now.
Yeah.
You know, they put me up on a lot of game, and I've taken a lot of classes and all kind of things, man. I'm constantly trying to figure things out. Prime would bring me a barbecue grill brush to what you put the sauce on the ribs with, because it's curved a certain way.
Yeah. Different texture, different look.
So I've learned so much from them. But one of the things that I thought is, you know, do I want to evolve? And I'm just going with the flow. Do I want to evolve all the way out to where I'm completely changed my art? Or do I want to keep some of that raw essence, right? And bring a little bit of both worlds. Nothing that I write glorifies any gang stuff, anything like that. My new artwork that's being painted now, you're going to find kidney disease educational stuff on there. I'm bringing forth one new layer, the same way that I bring forth cities that I've traveled to around the world. The Natural History Museum, you know, was blown away by the way I executed that wall. So much so that they like, okay, we're going to keep the wall. We're going to cut this 40-foot wall out and move it to a different part of the museum.
That's bad.
And we're going to commission out a few canvases to go in some of the director or the president's office. And it became a big deal for me, right?
I mean, you're memorialized in Los Angeles and world history,
I'm
man.
very happy.
It doesn't get bigger than that.
And I'm happy that I approached it like that, because it could have been, I'm never walking in there and just saying like, oh, let me just take this job. I walked in there, I talked to them, and we talked, and I really thought it through. I'm like, what would I want to do to this wall? What would I want to paint on it? that would bring something different, right? They understood when I told them I'm bringing a piece of LA in here. Like this is kind of a taboo thing. It's kind of fizzled out, right? Those eras of LA when you're driving around and seeing certain things.
Yeah.
I want to carry that forward, right? Not in a negative way, but using old tools, right? Or old markings.
Yeah.
That's what attracted the Getty Research Institute to create the Book of Friends, right? Which is another great book that they have in the Research Institute archives. They ended up doing some research and gathering up 150 kids from LA or artists and putting a book together that's probably been one of the most sought after books that the Gettys ever put out. And keep in mind, they have an arsenal of books in there. Absolutely. Shout out to David Brofman, for making that happen. We ended up doing an exhibition that was called Scratch in El Segundo, where we painted a whole museum inside, encapsulated with like panels. And, we did a huge show. That was the catalyst, man. That day I met all the right people and became friends with all the right people. Like it just, something changed there. I understood that although I was traveling around the world tattooing and making cool money and getting this satisfaction of like, taking the family or my wife to like different places, I'm like, there's something more prestigious. I have to pursue this feeling that I have inside, right? Growth, right? We want to evolve. And that was it. Like I knew that I wanted to paint. A tattoo is still amazing. That's, how I got into this level of like coming up. But I felt like, what's next?
This was the historical legacy being created with everything that formed your history and your foundation now is displayed historically for people to look back and learn from and interpret, or even in a literal sense, be like, this is indigenous Los Angeles art right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Something very important. We got to wrap up fairly soon, but this is very important. And it's been alluded to a couple times so far in the interview, but maybe I don't want to say the most important, but I want to talk about what could have been the best day of your life that turned into the same day that you received the worst news of your life. And it's something that's very important right now that you're still dealing with every day. I want to allow you to take that story.
So that story goes back to October 22. Now we just to take it back a little bit, a few years we were, I was diabetic, man. And like years, I early on diabetic, didn't know much about it, didn't take care of myself.
Yeah.
High blood pressure as well. Finally, started getting really sick and started taking medicine, started taking
for the diabetes
and all this stuff.
Yeah.
My whole tattoo career, I was struggling with that. Up in like around COVID time, we started doing really good. Like COVID, online business was booming. We built out our studio against all recommendations and people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't build a studio during this time." We huddled, we prayed on it, we brought in a team, we rebuilt our studio into like, a pretty magnificent space where I can create art. That's my sanctuary, right? And we did well and we worked hard every day. I mean, we worked so hard that we would sleep in the studio.
Sleeps.
We would stay there, bro, after exhausting days.
Right.
Saved up money and, my diabetes was in and out of control, right? But kidney disease was already lurking in the background.
Okay.
Kidney disease doesn't really make you feel anything, bro. You know what I mean? So if they tell you have CKD, you don't really know, man. And the lifestyle.
What's CKD?
Chronic kidney disease.
Okay.
And this is a push for anybody that's listening, to go get tested or to take better care of themselves, right? Or to pay attention. Come 2022, we were looking for a house for a while and we ended up finding a house. I let my wife say, I told her, you pick, this is you, like, you do the research. It was so much fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I couldn't go and look at every single one. I knew when we found that right one, she was going to say like, this is it. Like, so I went to a couple and we found a house in Lakewood.
Yeah.
And we went and negotiated it and,
important historic LA
Lakewood, man. And a crazy thing is, we used to go see Christmas lights around there, right? We used to go and drive around. Sometimes during COVID, we were driving around the same neighborhood that I moved to. We were in the car and we went to go look at Christmas lights there. And, little did I know I was going to move there a few years later.
Yeah.
But we ended up in Lakewood, man. We ended up getting a house there, went through all the process, couple months of escrow or whatever. The day we got the keys, and I still remember that day, is like, we're like very happy getting the keys and all that.
If I'm correct, you're the first person in your family to have their own house, or to buy their own house. Is that correct?
Well, for me and my brothers, yeah, but I never thought I would own a home, or I never thought I'd be where I'm at now, man. But it was a big deal for me, right? I've been waiting for that moment for a long time, and it's, something that I was like overexcited about. Like, it just felt great, but at the same time, I'm getting the news the same day that I have, stage 2 going into stage 3 kidney disease. You know what I mean? And
same day,
minutes apart, right? Minutes apart,
top
man.
Of the world,
and it was, man, I can't really describe the feeling of like, probably like, you win that $1 billion jackpot.
Yeah.
And then you found out it was a prank, right? Oh. The initial feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, what the?
How do you even process that, man?
How do you process it? And then, we go back and pray on it, man. And I said, well, I can't change that diagnosis. And, we have to literally accept what we have in our hands right now and day by day try to figure out, like, it's not an easy thing to process, right? I didn't even know what kidney disease was, really. But when I started reading up on it and asking people, man, you get the worst. The worst things come up first. So I started thinking, am I going to die soon? Am I going to die next month? Am I going to, what does this consist of? And I really didn't know about all the things that come with it, right? I went from stage 2 to like where I'm at now with 9% kidney function in need of a donor. But, I learned right away, although I had that initial feeling of like joy and then, heartbreak, or the next morning I woke up and I said, nah, I can't ruin this dream, bro. Like, we're in Lakewood, right?
Yeah.
And, we could never define like, oh, what community is going to be the best, but I moved to the best block I could have ever moved on to, bro. Neighbors came and started putting gifts on our door and coming and knocking and bringing us cookies and housewarming gifts. And man, it was, to me, that people are knocking. We're used to like, who's there? You know what I mean? But this was different, bro.
Right.
It was amazing. So I prayed on it, man. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to ruin that for me or my family. We're going to embrace all the good and all the hard work. And I'm going to be a warrior, bro. And I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to push forward. Like, I'm not going to let this thing make me say, man, I'm not going to do the workshop with the kids. I'm not going to, because I wasn't feeling sick and exhausted. I was feeling sick, but I mean, I'm going to be honest. I was already normalized. I had already made, diabetes feel normal. Like even the days when I was exhausted, I was taking caffeine and like just really pushing myself to those long days. And I love what I do so much. So it's one of those things where I never complained about work, man. So I use that as another, a lesson from my past to say, you overcame all these things. Here's one more bump in the road and you're going to be okay. What's going to happen, we don't know yet, right? But, we're going to find whatever the solution is, or we're going to, and it's very hard to go back and tweak your diet when you're used to eating, bad, which is good, but bad Mexican food and all this stuff that we eat. And when you're a tattoo artist traveling around the world tattooing,
especially,
man, it's so bad, I was drinking alcohol, doing all the stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. Started trying to educate myself a lot better and playing with the diet. I got my diabetes under control, everything, man. Immediately, my A1C got really good and everything. But unfortunately, my kidney disease has still declined up to like last year when I got put in the hospital at stage 4, to where I'm like, I was like at 10% or something. Now I'm at 9, going under that.
What does that mean? Tell like.
Well, I need a donor, man. I need I'm in search of
one kidney, 2 kidney. How does that work?
Both kidneys are done, super scarred up. they say it's from the diabetes. I think, there's a bunch of underlying factors that could have been medication, diabetes, several tests that I got that I still think played a role in it, where they put the contrast into your blood to do testing for like an obstruction. Whatever it was, I knew that dwelling on the past wasn't going to resolve anything.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out, I shouldn't have done this and that. I said, I just got to stop now. They gave me that diagnosis and said, we're going to put you on dialysis immediately. And even then I was stubborn. I said, well, what if I, try something different? Like they're like, you would have to change your diet right now and go plant-based and do all these things. And my wife found me a chef that day, And, I'll be honest, bro, like had I not done that, I probably would be feeling a lot worse. I ended up getting a chef. I went plant-based as much as I could. I haven't eaten meat, chicken, nothing. I've been watching everything I eat. I went from 220 to 175, bro. Good. I feel like it's good.
Feel better, yeah.
I feel great. Some days I feel really, really tired and exhausted. I've learned to train myself to say, like, I don't fight the kidney disease. I'm not fighting against it. I'm trying to work with it. Like, when I feel tired, I rest. And that's a good day for me, right?
Right.
A good day might be like, I walk every day with my dog, man. My dog Champ. Everybody sees me with my dog, but me and my wife walk with them. Good days are, I'm able to get my walks in, very clear-headed. Some days I'm very exhausted, foggy in the brain. I still don't know if I have a donor, right? I'm gonna thank everyone that had reached out to want to donate, man. They're testing a few people right now.
How does that process work, man? Because I know you've done a lot of advocacy. Yeah. Now that you have this platform, you can be outspoken just as far as kidney disease, but and the transplant process, how does that work? Like
the transplant process, well, first of all, I'm an O positive blood type, so I can only, take O positive. I could give to everybody, but I can't accept from everybody. We put out a video. I'm sure you saw it.
It's beautiful.
Thank you for the outpouring to every single person that reached out, man. We've had such a show of love and support. Lots of people reached out saying they want to help and they want to potentially be tested for donation. Unfortunately, they don't test every single person at the same time.
Right.
We submit a link to some of the potential donors. What we did was categorize them by blood type, by city, by whatever. We had my wife and one of the girls, Mari, categorize everyone. And, we started submitting the link to them. They click on the link. They fill out an application. They get a phone call. If they make the application, then boom, they're in the queue to start several layers of testing, right? It might consist of urine sample, blood work, MRI, sometimes a colonoscopy, mammogram. It depends. There's several layers. They want to make sure that the donor is healthy and that the kidney's healthy and everything else. And it's not a fast process. It takes time. When one of those donors, they might find an underlying condition, falls off. I'm blessed to have, several other people waiting to give me that link. To give the link to, right, so that they could potentially donate. But one of the things I've learned is that I'm, blessed to have these people, and I'm hoping that my donor is in that first group of people that are being tested right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep praying on it. But if not, if I do find my donor there, all the other people that reached out or anybody that's listening, if you want to become a kidney donor, I think it's really important, man, that the Latino community and, the Black community, educate themselves more. I feel like we're the least likely, to have knowledge on this stuff. I know my aunties and everyone else, we normalize diabetes and high blood pressure. It just runs in the family. There's never diet change. There's never nothing else, right? So where do we stop this, bro? Like, is it always going to be, insulin, dialysis, kidney failure, kidney transplant? I don't know if a lot of Latinos get transplanted, but I feel like, there's people out there that are listening. You can become a donor. It's a simple process. It just takes a few months. You could save someone's life. You only need one kidney to live, man. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a big blessing. I'm educating myself every day, trying to learn more and more about it. And I'm trying to talk to people that offered me their kidney and tell them, look, if I don't end up getting your kidney, whether, that I already find a different person, there's still the option to save another person's life. It might not be Big Sleeps, right? But it might be somebody else's auntie or somebody else's, mother or daughter
And
or
there's such a
cousin.
need.
Yeah. And they might not have the voice, bro. Like I want to use my platform to bring a few people on into my studio in these next few months and say, hey, let's tell your story on my social media and maybe we'll find you a kidney. If that's what it takes, right? Having a lot of followers, sometimes people don't know who to reach out to, bro.
Right.
How do you go and ask somebody? Until I got desperate, I put the video out because I started having nightmares every day, bro. I was like, one day good and then up at 2 a.m. just thinking, man, I'm going to die. I feel horrible. And then, it's different than getting shot, right? And patched up and then sent home.
Right.
This one's slow and it just creeps and it's in your mind all day and all night, like just waiting. So right now I'm waiting to get a phone call, that, hey, we got your donor. I'm hoping, that there's progress being made. It's a very easy, but slightly lengthy process, couple months of testing for the person, like for them to get the blood work back and all that. I'm going to continue to advocate. Whether, I get my donor, I might be on dialysis before I do, but I'm hoping that I could continue with this diet change, with this plant-based diet and exercise and keeping myself in a state where I could really control what I'm putting into my body so that it doesn't decline any further.
Which is just good advice as a whole. But where is that video pinned on your profile? I know you sent me the... But
it's still on my
what's
profile.
the best place for a resource? What are the best resources if somebody's interested, either A, in becoming a donor or B, learning more?
I mean, if you want to become a donor, I think you could actually go into your iPhone to the little heart app and you could become a donor there. There's a little little heart.
The health one?
I believe that has an option to become a kidney donor. If you're looking to try to help me out with a kidney, I mean, I still don't have a donor. And I'm not going to say that I have a donor until I walk out of that operating room with a kidney in my body.
Yeah.
Because things can change every day, right?
Yeah.
Life happens and things happen. And, we have to respect if somebody changes their mind along the way or whatever it is that happens. We can't take anything personal. We just have to keep moving forward. findsleepsakidney@gmail.com is the email that we have available for anyone to send an email in for helping me. But if they're looking just for resources in general, we can send them another link.
Findsleepsakidney@gmail.com. All right, man, we got to wrap it up, but this was so enlightening and honestly inspirational. True story of redemption. LA American Dream story, Pico-Union to Lakewood. Ups, downs. I mean, this is real life right here. And this, man, I am honored. We got to find a space.
Yeah,
we're going to have to do a little manipulation out here, but this is going to be displayed with pride and honor. And I just want to thank you for being here. But thank you for everything that you've done for the culture.
Man, thank you,
for the
brother.
city, for the people of Los Angeles, man, and what you've accomplished. Coming from where you come from is a true inspiration. And those are the stories that's why we're here, LA in a minute with Evan Lovett, because this city, there's something special here, man, that wherever you come from, you can accomplish big things. I know it's the American dream, but this is the LA American dream. And David Cavazos, Big Sleeps, thank you for accomplishing that and showing that it can be done and for inspiring a generation of people. Keep doing what you're doing. Let's get this man a kidney also in the meantime. But, man, Big Sleeps, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on, brother. I appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. All right, LA. It's been a minute.